Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Let's Have Renaissance, a podcast about writing, editing, publishing, literature, the arts, and more. I am Ito Otini.
And I'm Makaya Otini, and today we're speaking with Virginia Wagner. Virginia is a visual artist and writer whose work takes place in zones of conflict between nature and human construction. She's received commissions from Guggenheim Works in Process and National Geographic, as well as fellowships from several residencies, and she's a founding editor of the online journal Painters on Painting, alongside Julie Heffernan. We're excited to be with her today. First-time listeners, welcome. We're glad you're here. We're building a community of writers and artists from all walks of life, and since you're with us on this journey, we'd appreciate if you would like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and spread the word. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, or a guest you want us to bring on, please let us know, and for more free resources, check out the Datekeepers blog at thedatekeepers.com/blog. Thank you.
Virginia, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Thank you. I'm very excited to be talking with you both. I'm a visual artist and a writer and a professor at Purchase College in New York.
Can you tell us about your visual art? What stories are you trying to convey through your art? And when did you decide that you wanted to be a visual artist?
Yeah, so my work deals with environmental themes, and it always has. I grew up as the daughter of an entomologist, which is a scientist who studies bugs, and also a horticulturalist. So, my parents were obsessed with the natural world, and as a little kid, I always had a butterfly net in one hand and kind of a sketchbook in the other, and spent a lot of time outside, and was also very aware of humans' environmental impact. So my father also does conservation biology and spent a lot of time thinking about the ways that we are breaking up ecosystems, polluting our land, and the insects form the kind of most basic bottom strata of the natural world, and they are dying off in large numbers. So thinking about the causes and then the effects of that. So my first job was actually as a scientific illustrator doing illustrations of insects for his field guides. And that was pretty primary for me. And I think the way that I saw was influenced by looking at these tiny, beautiful creatures under a microscope and making sure to record them in accurate detail. So when I first started making paintings, my paintings really reflected that. They were quite realistic and about documentation. Right from the beginning, I was interested in storms, floods, fires, thinking about the ways that our natural world is getting more, the patterns are getting more chaotic and weather systems are getting more severe and natural disasters are getting more frequent. But when I started making paintings, I would paint these natural systems in a very kind of photorealistic way. And as my thinking and study and experimenting with art has gone forward, I've become much more experimental in how I make the paintings.
And you introduced yourself as both a writer and a visual artist. Can you talk about how those two media work together, and when you choose to work in one of those media as opposed to the other, what informs your choice?
Yeah, I know that you're both writers and connecting writing and visual art, which I think is not as often done. And I appreciate that with the platform that you two are making. They've always been the twin strains of my practice. Back in undergrad, I was a creative writing major and a studio art major. I've always had a poetry practice, and I'm interested in when these two strains can combine effectively to produce something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And then certain projects just want to be born in one or the other medium. There are ideas that are birthed much more strongly in visual arts and they don't require words. And there's things that want to be text. Because of that, I think my work has taken a lot of different forms and I've used a lot of different media, which isn't the best thing you can do for your career. I think the more savvy move is to make one thing over and over again so that you can get known for that thing. But for instance, my COVID skill was learning how to animate and turn my paintings into animation, which certainly involves writing because there can be a sound component, there's narrative transformation that can happen. The piece, mine are stop motion, so either painted 2D stop motion or 3D stop motion of kind of trash and waste pieces. And that's been really fun. And then my most recent project is actually a graphic novel. So I'm again moving into a different media because it was the media that the story asked for.
Love that. Actually, we also, we run the business, we do the podcast, and I think when you're doing different things at once, you don't get bored by one thing over and over. There are people who write about one theme or whatever, some type of characters for the rest of their lives. I personally don't think I am that person.
It can be a valid strategy for some people, but it's not the only valid strategy. And what you're doing is also a valid strategy because you're casting a wide net, throwing a lot of things out there, seeing what sticks. I really respect that. It's a sign that you're pushing your boundaries and always looking for new territory to explore.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I love that you all provide that kind of structure and thinking for artists and writers who don't necessarily have a background in the professional, external business, public side of what it takes to get the work out there.
Mhm. Can you tell us more about your work and what are some of your favorite pieces that you've worked on?
I had a commission for National Geographic, which was very exciting. I made a number of paintings for this polar passenger ship that travels between the Arctic and the Antarctic. And then the works are about climate change, and they're permanently installed on this ship. And I created a poetry book that went along with that exhibition that was penned by one of the characters in my paintings. So I kind of took on this pseudonym of this character I'd created, and she was writing an elegy for the ice, which is disappearing at an alarming rate.
Can you tell us a little more about this character?
Yeah. I called her the Bard, which I know is, Shakespeare's pen name, but the Bard of Svalbard. She is partly an opera singer who was hired by one of these expedition cruises to sing elegies about the ice. So she was kind of the hired entertainment for the ship. I was thinking about parallels with myself because I was the artist hired to create these visual entertainments for the ship, which were also elegiac. And then she is half an oceanic garbage patch, meaning that she is an accumulation of debris that comes together in the currents of the ocean. Those like large masses of garbage that could become as large as whole states or small countries. And so she is so heavy that she has to be kind of carried on board and kind of propped up while she sings.
That's very interesting.
That's cool.
And can we go back for a minute, if you don't mind, to the business side of your practice? And can you talk about what it takes, what you need to do to get your work out into the world? How do you make sure that you're able to connect your work with viewers, listeners, readers, people who are going to engage with it?
It's a great question. I'm actually teaching professional practice at Purchase College, both to senior undergrads and to MFA students right now. So I am thinking about this a lot and also thinking about how to take what I know and have learned over the past almost 2 decades or so and codify it in some way or allow it to be shared. I think the biggest thing is real community. So a network of people for whom you are making work, sharing work, writing about work together, showing work together, and through that community, networking with the larger art world. And that means showing up to gallery exhibitions, understanding what the various venues and sites of the art world are, whether that's museums and galleries or nonprofit institutions, collectors, etc., and applying to a lot of things. As you find the threads of your practice that have a public side to them, those will usually lead to more opportunities. So if public sculpture is your thing, applying to a number of opportunities to show your work in those types of venues, and then usually one of those projects will lead to the next one.
And where do you find those opportunities? If you're a visual artist or if you're a sculptor, where can you search and find opportunities to apply for?
A lot of different places. I am based in the New York City area, so we have this site called NYFA, New York Foundation for the Arts, and that's a fantastic resource for us in this local area. There's lists of residencies. Residencies are really wonderful for artists because they're granting the gift of time and space, and also usually community and dialogue for their work. The art world is famous for being very opaque and having a bunch of closed doors. So many institutions it's more of a dance and a kind of courtship ritual that you have to go through before you're let in the door.
You also have produced a short movie in collaboration with other people. Can you talk about that and what was your collaboration like with other people?
Are you talking about the project I did with dancers about Derek Jarman's Chroma?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was a wonderful project. It was during COVID, kind of the worst of the lockdown of COVID in New York City, where I have a number of dancer friends who are professional performers, and they could not make their work for about 2 years because all of the venues were shut down, and they also didn't have income during that period, even though they are extremely renowned ballet dancers. So there was a wonderful arts incubator program called the Guggenheim Works in Process that offered grants to collaborative artist teams to put together work that involved a performance element as a way to make sure that community was still vital and still fed with some sort of funding and also some sort of performance or audience component. And I got a grant to work with them, and I did the artistic design and the kind of storyboarding of a piece, and they did the kind of choreography and dance component. And our story Bible was Derek Jarman's Chroma. Jarman was a punk activist, experimental filmmaker, artist, writer in England. In the late 80s, he was diagnosed with AIDS and was one of the first public figures in England to be both out and also critical of the government's handling of that. So he kind of became an activist there, but he had been an activist for his whole life. So Chroma is his life story as a memoir organized into color chapters. Each chapter catalogs all of his memories of one particular color, like yellow or blue. It's extremely moving, extremely poetic, and he wrote it at a time when he was losing his eyesight to AIDS.
Speaking of him, can you talk about the influences who've informed your work, both on the visual side and on the literary side? Who are the reference points that you keep coming back to and finding traces of them in your own work?
Yeah. I have been lucky enough to work with some of my favorite artists. Two of the kind of goddesses in my pantheon are Julie Heffernan and Wangechi Mutu. Julie Heffernan is a contemporary painter. I describe her work as Baroque-style dreamscapes. I became obsessed with her when I was an undergrad and wrote her this lavish fan letter when I was studying abroad in Florence, and told her I was picturing the figures from her paintings dancing in the Medici villas that I was visiting, and asked her if I could work for her. And she said no, she doesn't work with anyone, but I could meet her. And from there, we hit it off. I ended up interning for her until I developed some skills and made myself useful, and then working for her. And since that time, we've ended up founding a journal together called Painters on Paintings. It's an online journal where artists write about an artwork that's influenced them. And we've been doing it since 2014 and have over 300 artists, including some bigwigs like Carly Schneemann, Peter Saul, Trenton Doyle Hancock. and also some young artists as well. So that's been really wonderful. She's a mentor and a great friend. And then Wangeshi Mutu is such an amazing artist. I fell in love with her work back in an undergraduate residency I did at Yale Norfolk, and kind of kept in touch with the studio and asked them every year after I met her, do you need any assistance? So finally, after graduate school, she did. And I ended up working with her for 4.5 years. And through being close to her practice, I think my own practice really opened up. I mentioned before that I used to be a kind of photorealistic painter or a really documentary type painter, but Wangeshi is amazing at elemental forces and really treating her art studio like a lab, like a alchemical experiment station. And from her, I think my practice really opened up. I began spilling and pouring paint, and when I wanted to create a flood, instead of detailing one exactly, I would actually create one on the canvas. And then, since the theme of my work is about the kind of structured human hand in contrast with these organic, spilled elemental forces, that began to play out in the paint.
And how about on the literary side? Who are your literary influences?
I'm a magical realist girl. So I love the kind of classics like Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Borges. And I love the kind of female contemporaries like Karen Russell and Carmen Maria Machado and Kelly Link. When I can find things that are kind of eco-feminist and magical surrealist, that's my happy place.
And can you talk about your writing? Do you explore the same themes?
The general themes of human relationship with the environment and landscape and cycles of construction and destruction are always there. The form of the writing changes. The long form piece that I'm working on now is a graphic novel about early entomologist and artist Maria Sibylla Merian. She was a naturalist in the time, like late 1600s, when people thought that insects arose spontaneously from mud. And she was integral to developing metamorphosis studies and proving the life cycles of insects. And she did that in Europe with these beautiful artistic diagrams of the insects that she studied. So she's both an artist and a naturalist. And then she also, in 1699, traveled to what's now Suriname in the northeast part of South America and the Guyana Shield, and studied the insects there for about 2 years with her daughter, and made amazing plates and brought back those beautiful studies of those insects. And so I'm doing a biography of her through the graphic novel form. So I'm both writing it and drawing it. And it's also partly about me and my father following in her footsteps. So my dad, the entomologist, is re-looking at her biology and kind of seeing, what did she get right, what did she get wrong, and why. And I'm kind of more interested in the social, cultural moment of the Dutch Golden Age, the Baroque aesthetic time period, but also the colonial forces at play, the legacy of colonialism in Suriname, and kind of the threads of that and how they connect to today.
Can you tell us about your research process also for your visual art? Because your visual art also is informed by research.
For my last solo show of paintings, which was at Radiator Arts in Long Island City, I researched the ecological history of Newtown Creek, which is the toxic water body which runs between Brooklyn and Queens. It's a Superfund site now. And I built the work thinking about the layered history and events that had happened to that water body, and also used objects from that site. So did a lot of collecting there. That's how I'd like my painting projects to happen moving forward. I'm much more interested in working on them when I can make them about a site that's local to the venue where I'm showing the work. And I feel like I have some handle on that scope of research, and I've had some practice with developing it and integrating it. The graphic novel is a much wider scope of research, and it's much more foreign because it takes place in the late 1600s, which is just so different from today. I think I spent basically a year researching. I was taking notes and I was drawing and I was sketching, but it didn't really feel like I could start writing until I had a basis for what were people eating? What did they wear? How did cross-Atlantic travel happen? What diaries from that time exist? And can I read some primary sources? So shout out to Anton de Kom and his history of Suriname. That's a great one.
Would you like to read to us either from that project or maybe, since that one has a visual component, from something that is purely prose or poetry?
Oh, thank you. I'd love to. I'll pull up The Mothers. So The Mothers was a poem that I wrote that sparked my first animation, and it becomes the audio of the animation. I didn't know how to make animation at all, and I wanted to do it in a way that had never quite been done before. So it took me a long time to figure it out. I wanted to combine stop motion, hand-painted animation with model making. So I actually used my childhood dollhouse as the set for this house and filmed it live, and then also green screened figures to play the different characters and shrunk them into the house. I also silhouetted them and poured paint through their silhouettes so that as they move, there are these like living, writhing paint silhouettes. And then certain scenes are actually just hand-painted animation also. So it's a real collage of different methods, but I hope that it has a kind of painterly touch or a painter's feel to it. I'm interested in the haptic quality of moving image, and I know that I'm not going to compete with some sort of slick animation because I'm teaching myself how to do all this, but I hope that the kind of amateurish, piecemeal way that I'm putting things together allows them to have their kind of own life. The Mothers. The twin mothers, holed up in perfectly upholstered armchairs, in many-roomed houses, hedged high with greenery, they are rotting. Magazine towers swaying slightly to a classical music record. When one falls in the night, the mothers start up, and like a reassurance, for a moment, feel no dread. The pages lay in dense carpet cover, ready to sprout. The bright suns are always ordering, reordering, dusting, opening blinds. The houses sit touching at their bases, on the edge of a great lake. One roof cut from sky, the other from shifting clouds on water. The mothers close the blinds, or rather, they say, "Please close the blinds. My head," they say, "bring me my yogurt from the fridge. You never visit me." The sons clean the houses best when the mothers are taken away and planted in the garden. The sons clean them so well then that the light bounces between the countertops and the fresh white walls forever.
That was great.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Enjoyed it.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.